Good evening, everybody. I hope you're all sitting comfortably for an enjoyable next hour or so. And I think we can get started. Okay, so welcome to Retina UK. This is Retina UK's webinar for this month. We have been hosting a series of webinars on different topics, and we're really pleased that you've been able to join us this evening to discuss the Access to Work scheme. I'm really pleased to welcome our guests this evening. Tonight, I'm joined by Retina UK's Deputy Chief Exec, Paula McGrath, and we'd like to welcome our guests, Josh, Emily, Simon, Bhavini, and Mark. Thank you so much for joining us to share your wisdom and experience about the Access to Work scheme. There's going to be opportunity for you to ask questions, and I'd ask you to please type them into the Q&A section, which if you're on a computer, you'll find it at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a tablet, you'll find the Q&A section under the reactions section. So please do type your questions in as you think of them rather than trying to remember them at the end, and I'll be collating them as we go through. At the end of the discussion, we will make sure that those questions are asked on your behalf. We'll do our best to get through as many questions as possible. We never know how many we're going to get. If for any reason we can't get to your question, then we will make sure that it's followed up over the next couple of weeks. So we won't leave you hanging, I promise. Well, thank you again for joining us this evening. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Paula McGrath.
Thank you, Denise, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So this evening's webinar is on Access to Work and the government scheme. And really, we want to give you some information on how it could support you in the workplace, but really to share the experiences of a number of our community who are using the Access to Work scheme. So at Retina UK, we believe really strongly in sharing people's lived experiences. There's a wealth of knowledge within our community, and we feel that by sharing it, we can all help each other out to understand what the opportunities might be for us. So really the focus is going to be on having a fairly informal chat this evening about access to work. We will cover off a few of the technical bits, but we're not going to go into lots of detail about the scheme itself, more around sharing people's experiences. Before we get started, I'd just like to invite our panellists to introduce themselves, just to give their name, maybe tell us where they work, and if they're happy to their sight loss condition. So can I start with you, Bhavini?
Yeah, sure. Hi, thanks, Paula. Hi, everyone. So I'm Bhavini Makwana. I'm the campaigns and projects manager at Thomas Pocklington Trust. I also founded and chair BAME Vision, and I'm actually a volunteer and ambassador for Retina UK. I chair their London peer support group. Thanks. Oh yeah, and I've got retinitis pigmentosa.
Thank you, Bhavini. Mark?
Hi everybody, my name's Mark Baxter. I'm the Information and Support Coordinator for Retina UK. I handle two of our service provisions, our Talking Service and our Peer Support Group Network, and I'm also living with retinitis pigmentosa.
Thank you, Mark. Simon?
Good evening, my name's Simon Lakin. I'm a technical business analyst. I work currently for the RNIB. I've done for the last year or so. Before that, for about 12 years, I worked for other organisations, and I've used Access to Work for about 20 years. I have a condition called rod-cone dystrophy, which is a type of RP.
Thank you, Simon. Josh?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Josh Freehan. I am the head of internships at Thomas Pocklington Trust. So I've access to work for the last 15 years, I'd say, in a number of different roles across public and the voluntary sector. And I'm also studying my barrister training course at the moment, as ambitions to become a barrister in the future. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I have Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy, so I have no central vision, just peripheral vision.
Thank you, Josh. You sound like a very busy man. Thank you for making the time to join us this evening. And Emily?
Sorry, it wouldn't unmute then.
No worries.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily. I work as a transitions coordinator in the education team at Thomas Pocklington Trust. But prior to that, I was actually on Josh's internship scheme, which is the first time I actually heard about access to work. So I suppose I've got quite a new experience of the scheme. And I also have retinitis pigmentosa and the same as Simon, rod-cone dystrophy as well.
Thank you, Emily. So how fantastic to have such a breadth of experience in the room with us this evening. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about how you've used access to work. I guess the sensible place to start really is to understand how you have used access to work. Bhavini, would you be able to give us some information about that, please?
Yeah, so when I became first aware of access to work, when I started working back in 2016, I hadn't even heard of the scheme. It was only until my manager told me about it. So once I'd got the job, and that basically opened up the world that, you know, what access to work is. I had an assessment, and it was actually the assessor who kind of told me what kind of things I'd be available to apply for depending on my job description and what my duties would be. So in terms of equipment and taxi journeys, as well as a support worker, that's what I use, and that's kind of developed over the various roles I've had since 2016.
Thank you, Bhavini. And actually now would probably be a really good point, Josh, if you don't mind just spending a couple of minutes giving us sort of a fairly broad overview of the scheme and
Yeah, of course.
who's entitled to use it and how it might be able to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Paula. So just so everyone's aware, as Paula mentioned earlier, it's a government scheme. So it's run through the Department of Work and Pensions and administered through the Job Centre Plus team within the access to within Department of Work and Pensions. And the scheme has been set up to assist employers in making reasonable adjustments to support new and existing employees. So just move to my next bit of slide. So what sort of support is available through the scheme? So adaptations to premises and equipment, specialist aids and equipment. So I'm using JAWS at the moment, which is screen reader software, which access to it kindly funded. Support workers, travel to work, and also travel within work. Now, there is a couple of caveats within this aspect, though, because it's only technically eligible if there is no practical public transport routes that you can use within getting to work or getting around work as well. Awareness training for colleagues as well within the organisation. So, for instance, for certain conditions, access to it will fund organisations to go in and provide awareness sessions around that specific condition or disability. So who can actually get access to work? So to be eligible for access to work, a person needs to have a disability or a health condition, which means they need either an aid or equipment or financial or human support to enable them to do their work. Have a mental health condition and need support or assistance within work. They must be 16 or over, be in or about to start work, or self-employed. They also need to be residing in England, Scotland, or Wales. And I don't know if anyone on the session tonight is from the Northern Ireland, but there is a separate scheme within Northern Ireland. And also, they must not be claiming incapacity benefit or employment support allowance whilst in work. So, I know Bhavini started to mention earlier around how needs are assessed. So if we just do a quick run through in terms of how the process works. So once someone finds out or they're in work and have if we use sight loss, for example, have acquired sight loss. If you've just been successful within an interview and you're about to start your job, it's important as soon as you get your start date to start to think about access to work. You can either do this online or over the phone in terms of making your application. Once Access to Work receive this, an advisor will give you a call to gather some other information about what you may need, a bit more about your condition. They will also as well speak to your employer just to clarify a few other details. But as you can imagine, most advisors aren't necessarily technical, so they don't necessarily understand all different conditions. So they have to actually get technical expertise and advice around this. So then they will refer you for an assessment, which will usually take place within your place of work. And within that, the assessor is someone with specialist knowledge. So within sight loss sector, for instance, RNIB have a team that work with Access to Work to provide some assessments around that. And then following on from that assessment, so when they perform that assessment, it's important actually, and we would advise that you may have your line manager within the meeting with you, because it's about talking about the tasks you will be performing and understanding what is the best equipment or aids, or whether human support would be beneficial for you to perform that task or within your job. So what we would definitely advise as well is being very prepared for that assessment. Again, it's a two-way process, so it's not someone just dictating to you what you should be having. Again, it's very much talking to you, understanding your needs, and it's best if you've done some research prior to that to understand what is the best types of equipment you would benefit from. And if you've used equipment in the past, so depending on what stage you're in your life, say for instance, if you've used JAWS throughout your education, it's probably beneficial for you to continue to use JAWS because you're used to it. Just move on next slide. So in terms of just to put people's mind at ease sometimes, because they get a bit panicky around this, Access to Work will fund for the equipment and the aids as well. And also, if they can't contribute all of it, some employers as well will obviously contribute the remainder of the amount towards it as well. But it's very important just to say that you put your application in as soon as possible, whether before you're starting work, because there are some time limits around when you actually need to apply by. So just in terms of some tips as well around this, I suppose I'd like to cover off. So in terms of know what you want, so like I mentioned before, do some work prior to any assessments that you're going to be having, get some advice from others, also do some research online, also contact some equipment suppliers as well. So they're always happy to provide and go and visit you to demonstrate the different types of equipment. Just because you've used something previously doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the best thing for you to use in that job. So definitely get some hands-on training around this. What I would suggest as well, anything that you do receive, especially within specialist equipment, make sure you take up the opportunity to have some training provided on that. Like myself, I've used JAWS for many years, but however, every time I do a new assessment, I try and get some refresher training on JAWS just to make sure that I'm up to date with and using it proficiently, I suppose. One thing I would definitely say is it's so important as soon as you get your start date, if you're starting a new position, to make sure you get your application in early. There are significant delays, or have been significant delays with the Access to Work process, up to 6 months sometimes. Again, it's very dependent on where you're based in the country. It's a bit of luck of the draw sometimes. I've had cases where people have been through the process within 4 weeks, and others that have taken up to 6 months. It is getting better. The Department for Work and Pensions are putting a lot more members of staff within the department now to focus on getting the backlog down, and they are doing that very well. And also the RNIB have been doing a lot of campaigning around this, and they've actually taken on board quite a lot of the recommendations they've made. So it is getting better. And then just finally, Yeah, and I suppose just the final thing as well regarding the assessment, I think I mentioned it earlier, just ensure that your line manager, if possible, is present within that as well, just to ensure that, again, they can pick up any areas where you may not have mentioned as well, so they know your role, because you're going to perform that role for them. So it's good to have them within the room to provide that sort of advice. Just in terms of some facts, a bit of an interesting fact, so over 5,000 people with sight loss access the Access to Work scheme, which is the second largest group of individuals that access the scheme. Don't ask me which the biggest group is, because I don't know that statistic, unfortunately. But like I said, I think there's people on this call, again, on the other members of the panel, will say that it's a great system when it works, but yeah, it can be quite challenging. And I suppose one of the other tips is as well, is just be ready to, you may have to fight your case as well. So sometimes you may have to appeal decisions. It doesn't always go your way sometimes. And remember, like I said, the advisors aren't experts. So again, yes, you are having to explain quite a lot of things to them that they're not necessarily aware about. I hope that gives a good overview, Paula.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, that's really helpful. And the thing that struck me there is when you were speaking about research, do your research, it's really important. And hopefully that's why a number of people may have joined the call this evening, to hear from others, to make sure they're armed with as much information as they can, to make informed choices, really, which is what it's all about, isn't it? Is knowing what the options are to be in a position to make those informed choices. Thank you. Mark, would you like to just give us a very brief overview of Access to Work for yourself?
I first learned about Access to Work back in 2016 in a previous role, but this was more for equipment. I was struggling with reading documents and handwritten application forms, so I needed a magnifier, so a CCTV magnifier, which was the first piece of equipment that I ever got through Access to Work. And then more recently, I started with Retina UK, and the first sort of 8 months into the role, I found that not only was I supplied through Access to Work for, again, a large monitor and for home working, and also Supernova, which is another form of screen reading software for a laptop or PC. I felt that I now needed a support worker. I felt that it was starting to affect my productivity, that I couldn't do a new job as quickly as necessary. So it caused, obviously, a lot of stress and anxiety around not so much losing my independence, which was something you mentioned at the beginning. No one wants to lose their independence, especially when you're trying to put your foot in a new job. So it was the independent side of things was what I was trying to cling on to, but it was actually bringing me down. And I felt that getting a support worker actually released different type of independence, which meant I could actually get on and focus on my role by having a support worker help me with the administrative side of things.
Thank you, Mark. And I think that's a really important area, actually. I'd like us to pick that up again a bit later in this discussion, the whole sort of matter of independence. Of course, what we're talking about here with our community is progressive sight loss as well. So the importance of making decisions at the right time. So we're prepared, particularly with the delays that might be faced. Thank you, Mark. Simon.
Hello. Yeah, I've used Access to Work primarily, I think, mostly for travel, really. I still have quite good central vision. I have used Access to Work provide equipment in terms of things like large monitors and lighting over the years. But when I was first diagnosed, I changed jobs, and I was required to travel quite a lot to different places around the area, and it was difficult to get to by public transport quite often. So I a support worker, a driver, to drive me to those locations. I know it's very hard sometimes to actually get a support worker. I was fortunate that I had a family member who was able to provide that kind of service for me. So they would drive me to a particular appointment and wait around and come back for me when needed. And then more latterly, I've used Access to Work in terms of travel to work, in terms of taxis. Not in my current role. I've actually, since COVID, I've kind of changed roles and I'm working from home more. But before that, for about seven or 8 years, I was traveling to a job, which is quite hard to get to with public transport. So I got a train for part of the journey and then got a taxi from the train station to the office, and at the end of the day, the other way around, from the office back to the train station and train station to home. So and that worked quite well for quite a number of years. I guess some of the challenges for me were kind of like managing the taxi firms and making sure they arrived on time, and the claiming back of the invoices from Access to Work. But without that, I don't think I could have done that job for 7.5 years without that support from Access to Work with taxes.
Thank you, Simon. And we've already, we've heard quite a breadth of experience now. But Emily, you're relatively new, I think, to the world of work and certainly Access to Work. Would you like to tell us about your experience, please?
Yes, of course. So I graduated from university last year. And when I was looking for jobs, employers didn't know how to support me, and I didn't know how to tell employers how to support me either, because I'd not heard of Access to Work. And so it wasn't until I joined the Get Set Progress Internship program that Josh runs that once I was successful in my application for that, they actually said, you need to apply for Access to Work. This is what it is. This is how it works. And so that's what I did. And I would pre-warn people that the questions can almost be a bit off-putting, in the sense that you should apply for it really before you're in your role if you're starting a new role, but they do ask it as if you are in your role. And I remember being very confused by that when I was applying for it the first time. But yeah, I was able to get various equipment, so a widescreen monitor, and I used Zoom Text at university, and I can't remember if it was probably the assessor that recommended that I use Zoom Text Fusion, which is Zoom Text, but you also then have the option of using a screen reader that's like linked together. I don't know the technical term, but obviously for me and my condition being progressive, it's, as you said, Paula, like it's important to kind of plan ahead. So that was good to be able to have the training to know how to use Zoom Text, but also if in the future I want to use the kind of screen reading software, to use that as well. And so that was a really good thing that I learned from the scheme.
Thank you, Emily. It's still really concerning that people are not aware of Access to Work. We regularly hear from our community from people who have been working for many, many years that are not aware of Access to Work. I just encourage everybody who does access the scheme or knows about it to spread the word as much as they can, and never make any assumptions that that friends or colleagues are aware of it. Josh, is there anything you'd particularly like to add from a personal perspective on this?
Yeah, I suppose I've had similar experiences to everyone on the call, in terms of I've used Access to Work in the past for travel into work, whilst in work, and also had a support worker. It all depends, and I suppose that's what's identified for me. Depending on what your role is, you will then start to identify, in actual fact, what is the right provisions that will need me to enable me to do that role. I think just to pick up on, I think it was Simon that made the point around some of the process in terms of claiming back from them can be difficult, but they are looking to make a lot of changes to the system at the moment, so it makes it a lot more streamlined. I think, Bhavini, you may also use the program for support worker as well. They are trying to streamline the process, make it more digital. But I remember the days of having to getting people to sign it off, and then they'd send it you back, and you'd say, no, you've filled in the wrong form, and it was very complicated at the time. But they are trying to, like I say, streamline the process. But I think, Paul, you make a really good point, and Emily is when she says about hadn't heard of the programme, we're trying as much as we possibly can to ensure that ECLOs, for instance, are well aware of the access to work, ensuring that people at diagnosis point understand about it, those going through the education system as well, making sure that they're aware of it. So we're trying to enable the individual to be empowered to talk to their employer about access to work, because unfortunately employers, again, they're still not aware of the programme either. So even HR professionals, who you would assume would be well equipped with understanding what's available for members of staff, because again, it's around those staff that acquire sight loss within organisations as well, not just for those that are applying for positions. They should be well aware of it, but I think recent statistics state as well, high numbers of employers still unaware of access to work and how it can benefit them.
Yeah, absolutely the case. Thank you. I'd just like to explore a little something around sort of the emotions connected to access to work, and maybe the first application that goes in. And we've certainly heard from some of our community that they are concerned that it will result in a loss of independence. I wondered whether I might invite some of you just to share with us sort of more around, less about the practicalities, but around the emotions that went with applying. Bhavini, is there anything you'd like to share with us around this?
I think for me it was a bit of a relief actually, because the job that I applied for after having not worked for over 14 years was actually like an activities coordinator. So I was traveling all over East London and London, planning activities, going out to do risk assessments. And even though I got the job and I loved planning events and activities and meetings and all that kind of stuff, I was really frightened. I remember I got the call to say that I was successful. Then afterwards, reality hit. Oh my God, I've got the job. How am I going to do it? How am I actually going to travel? I just recently learned how to use a long cane, and I hadn't really traveled independently. I relied a lot on my husband. You know, the only thing I ever did was just take the kids to school and back. I didn't really do much. So once I learned about access to work, and then my manager explained to me what it was and how it would work and how it would enable me to carry out going to all those different venues across London, carrying out risk assessments for activities to make sure they're safe for blind and partially sighted people to travel, you know, planning public transport routes. For me, it was like, yes, you know, I was quite happy that such a scheme existed, which meant that I could actually do the job. Some of the equipment that they suggested, the assessor, like a dictaphone. So whilst I'm out and about, you know, I wasn't able to take notes or anything, but the dictaphone, I could just, you know, speak into it and then come home and type risk assessments up and do whatever I need to do. So for me, I think those first 3-4 initial months, because it did take a while for everything to fall in place. So I think Emily mentioned, you know, try and apply for it before you start date, because it is a bit of a lengthy process. So the first few months actually was a little bit strong, because you're relying on other members of staff to help you. Things are a little bit delayed because you can't just get on with your job. But once it all falls into place, for me, I think it was, yeah, I just couldn't wait to get started.
That's great to hear, Bhavini, that it had such a positive impact for you. And you've mentioned that it was actually your employer that made you aware. Were you working in the sight loss sector at the time, may I ask?
I was, yeah. And it was actually, I had 4, it was a small sight loss charity. There were only 6 of us, and 4 of us were vision impaired, and the CEO was vision impaired herself. So I was quite fortunate that they informed me about quite a lot of stuff that would help through access to work.
Yeah. That's great. Okay. Mark, you've already sort of picked up on this a little bit, but I wonder whether you might like to expand a bit more on sort of the point that you'd reached, certainly with regards to a support worker, perhaps the point that you'd reached at work, and a bit about how that felt for you, making the decision to apply for a support worker.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt that I got to a point where I just wasn't, my productivity wasn't as sharp, and I could do with the software taken over, I could do the role, but I just couldn't do it as quickly as I wanted to, and so accurately as well. And being in a new role, I didn't want that to impact my position. and I'd never had a support worker before, and I thought I'm going to have to, I've hit another impact point, in my start loss journey, that I am not going to be able to do everything myself. And it was quite hard hitting, considering that I've been around computers and IT for almost 20 odd years, and to have that another massive part of my life taken away from me, that I just couldn't use a computer as quickly as I wanted to. That's when I decided that it's about time that I had a support worker. And as soon as Caroline, who is also my wife as well, took the position, with 18 years of administrative experience under her belt anyway, I knew that she was quick enough and confident enough to be able to be relayed the information that I will send her, and help us do a lot of the communications that I do for our peer support groups. It was just a massive weight off my shoulders. It meant that I could really start to enjoy doing what I've always wanted to do, is to be out there and support our community living with inherited sight loss. And I really started to enjoy it. Caroline not only is my administrator for as a support worker, but she is also my mobility. So getting to peer groups, whether it be by car or by public transport, she's also my guide as well. So it's just been a massive weight off my shoulders, and the anxieties and the stress of being able to get to the office on the train on my own have kind of subsided now, and it just means that I can just really enjoy doing the role that I've always wanted to do. And I feel that anybody is at that stage where they're not sure whether they want to get a support worker, is just to look into it, do some research and apply for one.
Thanks, Mark. And I hope you don't mind me saying that myself and your colleagues probably saw that weight lift off your shoulders at the point that you had a support worker. You were a changed man. So yeah, I think a great advocate for people to consider whether that's right for them. I'm just thinking, maybe Simon, how did you hear about Access to Work, and how did you feel about applying for the first time?
I heard about Access to Work through RNIB, actually. When I was first diagnosed, I was diagnosed with a condition and lost my license on the same day, because I was told to stop driving exactly the same day, and I can still remember it now. But I rang up Retina UK. It was called British Retinitis Pigmentosa Society back in the day. Got a lot of advice and support, and then I rang RNIB, and they gave me a lot of advice. Even though I had to stop driving, and it was a bit of a shock being diagnosed and all of that, I was determined to carry on trying to be as independent and do a job as best I possibly could. So I had no qualms about contacting Access to Work, really. It was just, I think when I look at it, is we all need each other in some ways. We all need a someone to deliver food to the supermarket, don't we? We're all dependent on each other in society for lots of different things. So yeah, I was determined to carry on, and when I was in that role where I was traveling around a lot, I had colleagues who were doing the same kind of role as me. Most of them were driving to the appointments, and they were able to do different types of appointments than I could, because I couldn't drive. They were going to places to see someone, maybe in their house in the middle of nowhere, which was hard to get to by bus or train. So I thought, no, I want to do the same as they can do. I was determined not to be different in that respect. So I was quite happy to try to get a support worker to do that, to drive me to the different places. So yeah, that was my attitude anyway.
Thank you. Emily, you explained to us that it was through the TPT internship scheme that you heard about Access to Work. So you hadn't been made aware of it when you were leaving university, that it would seem that was something you didn't find out about until you tried to enter the world of work.
Yeah, so when I left university, it's a very big transition, and I was comparing myself to my sighted peers who were applying for jobs and getting interviews and going into the world of work with ease. And I couldn't really even access most of the application forms. And I remember thinking to myself, how are other blind and partially sighted people doing this? So then when I did find out about access to work, it kind of clicked into place for me then. Because I think otherwise it can be really frustrating when you don't have that equipment to access things, and also to be able to say it to an employer that's not aware as well, to say, actually, you can support me, like, this is the scheme, this is how it works, like, I can do this. Because I think it without access to work, sometimes it's easy to feel a bit negative and feel like, oh, well, I can't do this, do things in the same way that other people can do them. But with the specialist equipment or the aid of a support worker, you can do the job that you want to do, really.
Thank you, Emily. And Josh, I guess your circumstances have probably changed over the years. Have you had a lot of interactions with access to work and changes to how you've used the scheme?
Yeah, and there was one point I was going to make specifically around the support worker aspect as well, linked to the driver aspect. And it's not just around productivity, which I think it's great, and that's why I had a driver before as well. I had a role which was very much similar in terms of out in the community across the region, across the West Midlands. So for me to have to get taxi, bus, taxi to try and get somewhere, it was a lot more efficient use of my time, of my employer's time, for me to have a driver. So that was beneficial. But the other thing as well is with my sight loss, I use JAWS. And there was a lot of professionally produced documents that I had to do, which went to different stakeholders. So whether that be senior management or external facing documents. So I didn't want to put anything out there that had I could check that it was spelled correctly. However, it's more about how it looks. So rather than it having, I don't know, half it be bold, just to have someone to look over it was very important. They're not doing the main part of the job in terms of typing it up, but they were assisting me, ensuring that it looks professional. And I think that was advice that I got very early on from someone, just to ensure that, yeah, don't necessarily feel like it's taking away your independence. It's actually making sure that, like someone said earlier, being treated like your sighted peers as well, and making sure you're doing a professional job. So I think it's just making sure you benefit from the system. So I'd heard of access to work in 2009-10, I think, when I first got my first I started a graduate scheme. So I remember going in and telling the employer about access to work, because one thing that someone always told me is, well, if you've got sight loss, the person, the other side of the table, is probably going to be have reservations or hesitations on. Look, I work with employers all the time and trying to convince them that blind and partially sighted people can do a job. Yeah, we're starting from scratch, really. Like they can't even believe, some of them, how we can use a computer. So from that starting point, yes, you are going to have to ensure that you are putting that employer at ease, really, the other side of the table, to say, look, this is how I use technology, and the access to work scheme will pay for this. You're not even out of pocket, and this is how I can perform just as well as anyone else in the organisation. So yeah, and sorry, so from then on in, really, that's the approach I took with all of my employers, really, just ensuring that I put them at ease, really, to make sure that they knew I could do the job, and how access to it would benefit us as well. Because it's even as simple as things as, like we said earlier, getting to work. Most people, unfortunately, we live in a society where people don't really understand sight loss. So even from as simple as, well, how are you going to get to work? Do you know what I mean? How are you going to get here? Well, yeah, I can actually get there, and it's absolutely fine. Again, a lot of this is holding people's hand through it, and you've got to, I suppose, advocate for yourself as well, and tell them. And I suppose I've always had to do that. And from an employer's perspective as well, yes, it is frustrating. So I've been the side of supporting members of staff through it as well. You may get a great advisor, you may not get a very good advisor, and I guarantee you're probably going to have to coach them through the process as well. So that's, I suppose, the advice I was given earlier. Just be prepared. You may have to have some challenging conversations with them.
Thank you, and yeah, wishing to remain as positive and optimistic as we can be. But I think we also have to be realistic, don't we, and prepared for the challenges that may come. Bhavini,
and so I think,
sorry,
just to say, Paula, on that it is well, it's enabling lots and lots of people to remain and retain work, isn't it? So it is a great scheme. It like everything, it has its downfalls. So like for instance, renewals, for instance, where you have to make contact with them on a 12-month basis or whatever to renew stuff. They are trying to like I said, they are trying to streamline the process. They are trying to understand the customer's journey through Access to Work now more, and understand how people are navigating through it. So to try and make it less bureaucratic and take away the red tape. But everything takes time, doesn't it? But it's moving in the right direction.
Thank you, Josh. And yeah, we need to be aware of the good, the bad, and the ugly, really, don't we? So we're prepared for what lies ahead, but we know that people with sight loss are incredibly resilient and need to be. So I'm sure most people are up for the conversations that need to be had, and to do that to advocate for themselves.
I think, Paula, as well, it's probably maybe worth talking as well around for those that want to access support workers, the different. So employers may employ the individual, or sometimes the individual yourself, you actually become the employer, so you employ the support worker as well. I just think it's good that people are aware that not all employers may do that for you, and also there are agencies, so local agencies. So for instance, in a previous role, I used Office Angels to have a support worker, which was great because they did all the recruitment process, and it was quite straightforward. But there's different ways in which to do that, and there is advice and guidance, and I can share some advice as well around that as well, in terms of in a Word document.
Thank you, Josh. I think it's just worth spending a little bit of time on support workers, actually, because I'm aware that it is quite a big thing for people, and also we're certainly getting a few questions in around support workers. Bhavini, would you be willing to share your experience of support workers with us, please?
Yeah, sure. So when I first started looking into support workers, I actually wrote the advert myself, what kind of duties were kind of expected, what kind of support I may need with. So it was like kind of recruiting myself, like, coming up with a JD. And then at that time, there were two of us in the office that wanted a support worker. So we were going to share. So we both invited them into the office, had a bit of an interview, like an informal chat, so to speak, and then just sort of shared more about the duties or about the roles, get to know them a little bit. And that kind of worked well. We kind of explained the process of submitting timesheets and how they'd get paid, and the whole thing. And then I kind of changed roles, moved more into kind of like a central role where I didn't really need a support worker that much to begin with. And so that support worker, continued supporting my other member of staff, and I then needed somebody else. So that time I actually did go through an agency. So like Josh mentioned, they'll do all the recruitment process, the advertising, the interviewing. You'd get to meet them, and if it was a match, then hey, and then you kind of start working together. And again, the timesheets and stuff like that were through the agency, so they'll manage and control all of that on your behalf. Then COVID happened again, so then we're working from home, so less reliant on the support workers and things like that. We hadn't started working remotely before that. It was all face-to-face in the office or out and about traveling, so that was a bit of a new concept. So now, again, when I was looking for a new support worker coming out of COVID, I decided to do the whole thing myself again. So just sort of putting an advert out, interviewing, they've never worked with blind or partially sighted people before, just give them guidance on sighted guiding. Luckily through work, they can go into the volunteer courses, or you can train them yourself, share videos. There's lots out there. and then you kind of pick it up as you go along anyway. So, you know, what one support worker at work is going to be different to another. So, you know, it's just a conversation on the job, like, you know, actually, can we do it this way? Just reminding them that actually you're supporting me, you're not doing my role. So, you know, I was always out and about going to new venues, and it was just so natural for people to start making eye contact with my support worker and then start talking to them. So I had to just keep reminding them, actually, can you just signpost them to me, and just, you know, let them know that I'm actually the member of staff. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. So again, having a support worker has, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, if I should say. But, you know, if you have that open conversation to begin with, what's expected, if it's all written out, then, you know, it works nicely. And yeah, every single support work I've had, it's always been a good relationship, and you just sort of build on it. So, you know, if it doesn't work out right from the get-go, which it may or may not, it's something you can sort of build on and just have that open lines of communication that actually it's best to do it that way, or this is how it's preferred, or planning routes. So I'm a guide dog owner now, so when my support worker is planning routes, we have to make sure that it's accessible in terms of, because he's not escalator trained, we need to plan routes in a way that you know, it's either step free, or, you know, I don't mind walking. So getting off, you know, just having that conversation about what works best, and just, you know, they're supporting you to do your job, not doing your job for you. So I've had both experiences.
Thank you, Bhavini. I just wonder whether it might be worth us picking up on any of the other sort of maybe pitfalls or challenges that people have experienced to help forewarn others on the call this evening. Simon, is there anything from your perspective that's proven tricky, or have things been quite smooth for you?
No, it's not always been smooth sailing, like Josh alluded to. Taxis, sometimes taxis turn up, sometimes they don't. My taxi firm wanted to invoice me weekly, whereas Access to Work like to be claimed monthly. So there's all that bit of an extra admin headache in some ways. But without it, I don't think I wouldn't be able to do that job. And what we were talking about before was planning ahead. Even before I kind of really accepted the job, that particular job where I needed a taxi, I'd planned the route out. I'd looked at how far it was going to be, you know, looked at how long the journey would be, just to plan, could I really do this? And I did it for 7.5 years, and it worked out really well. But I think planning ahead and working out, can I realistically do this travel, you know, with the taxi and so on and so forth. That was, for me, was planning ahead is always a good thing, thinking ahead. Yeah, that was the kind of, I mean, I think Josh is right. The improvements are coming so you can claim online, I think, nowadays. Whereas that until recently, you have to fill in the actual paper forms and send those off to Access to Work, which obviously is very cumbersome and slow. And streamlining it and making it digital is something that's I think it's been crying out for a very, very long time. And the delays are coming down. I know the RNIB have had a big campaign over the last 6 months with Access to Work and DWP, and it's bearing fruit now. So I think the delays are definitely getting shorter in terms of claims, and also in terms of applying for Access to Work now as well, which is all good news for blind and partially-sighted people.
Certainly is, Simon, yes. Emily, did things run smoothly for you? I mean, appreciating that you're on an internship, time was of the essence, I would imagine, as far as getting the right support was in place. How did it work out?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, things did run fairly smoothly, apart from the timing, which, as you said, is probably one of the most important things, especially when you're doing a job for a certain amount of time. So I think it took about 2 months for everything to kind of fall into place properly. Which was a shame, because obviously before that time I was kind of struggling with accessing certain things, and I felt like I just couldn't do my job as well as I could have been doing. But then it did just show when the equipment came in, what a change it made in terms of my productivity and the quality of my work. But yeah, I'd kind of just reiterate what Simon said in terms of planning ahead, especially with the timings. obviously, as we've all said, hopefully it'll be getting better and there'll be less delays. But yeah, I think it's really important to just apply as soon as you have your start date, and then hopefully it can run a bit more smoothly for you.
Thank you, Emily. I'm conscious of time and wanting to leave enough time for questions. Perhaps if I invite each of you just to share, if you've got sort of one piece of advice to anybody who's considering access to work, whether you've got one sort of tip or one thing you'd suggest that they give consideration to. Mark, is there something that you think you feel is particularly important if people are just thinking about applying for the first time?
Yeah, definitely. If it's to do with getting a support worker, for me, it was finding the right support. If you're working in a neutral environment like a workplace, then an agency would be brilliant. I work from home majority of the time, so to bring a stranger, as it were, into my home, it made me feel a little bit uneasy. So that's why I went down the route of seeing if, and I was told and I was informed that support worker doesn't need to be qualified as a support worker. They just need to be able to follow your instructions to help you, and obviously drive if they've got, if mobility is needed. And I think it was Simon that said that he had a family member. So always, if you need a support worker and you know someone that may be able to support you, whether it be driving you or whether it would be admin, look closer to home before you go to an agency, especially if you remote work. And it was also the more I needed someone that I could trust. Bhavini mentioned about getting someone that knows how to guide you. I thought that was very important for me. Know how to be guided. How and how what our personalities were like, and obviously Caroline fit the bill. We've been together for 22 years, and I feel that she was a perfect candidate, and it just fell into place that she was not liking her role and she wanted a new challenge, and not saying I'm a challenge, but she just wanted something different, and it's just got us out traveling a bit more together, and it's just changed. We both work part-time now, so we've got more time. So yeah, it's picking that, do your homework. I think Emily said about doing your research about your equipment. Also do some really good research about finding that right support worker, because once you click, then you'll be a good team for the foreseeable future, rather than just picking any old one and then find that you're going through a different support worker each week, because you're just not gelling, and I've heard stories that does happen.
Thank you. Emily, top tip from you?
Top tip, again, not to sound like a broken record, but that kind of preparation and planning ahead, I think is just really important. Get your application in as soon as possible, and research in terms of equipment, as well as we've said about support workers. But yeah, thinking about what works for you as an individual.
Thank you. Simon?
Similar, be clear about what you want. Don't be put off by the advisor, because obviously something like travel to work, obviously it's an ongoing cost to them, and they'll try and say, can't you do it by public transport? Can't you do it this way? But to be confident, explain why for me, it wasn't safe, or it would take too long to do that journey in any other way. So be confident about what you really need and fight your corner.
Thanks, Simon. Bhavini?
Similar, yeah. I think if you know what your options are, you can best self-advocate for yourself. So Simon just mentioned about travel, in terms of sometimes you may need to increase your hours when it's renewing your claim every 3 years or so. If your job changes, your duties change. And I've actually been told, well, can't somebody else do your job? Isn't there another member of team that can actually do that job for you? Actually, no, this is what I'm getting paid to do. So as long as you're aware of your rights, what you're entitled to, that you've got self-advocacy, talk to other people that are getting access to work support, and just find out from them. And I think you're an individual, you're a unique person. If other blind or partially sighted people who get access to work may not need that much support, but you actually need some sort of different tech or additional hours. Don't be afraid, don't be ashamed, don't be embarrassed, because it's whatever helps you to do your job. I think that's what was the biggest barrier for me, because I just wasn't seeing that many people use the support worker for different tasks. And it got me to a point where actually I need it, so I'm just going to embrace it because I'm entitled to it, and these are the hours I have to help me. So yeah, do your research, plan, and don't be shy to ask.
Wise words, Bhavini, thank you. And Josh, anything else from yourself?
Josh, you're just
You're
on mute.
muted, Josh.
Sorry.
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yes, great.
Apologies. Yeah, I was
No
just to follow on really. It's just about being robust in your challenge really back to them. And then just one other thing, as soon as you get that start date from your employer, pick up the phone and start your application. The quicker you start, the quicker you'll get the support put in place.
Super, thank you. We have got some questions. So if everybody's happy, I'm going to ask some of those. This one might be for yourself, Josh, I think. Is there any support to get to interviews, or must you already be working?
Is there any what, sorry?
Is there support to get to an interview, or must you already be working?
Yes, I believe you can. Potentially. Can I come back to that one?
Yeah, of course.
Look into that one and come back to the person.
Yes, yeah.
Just to say on that, some employers will reimburse you to get to interviews, but it's different. But I will take that away and come back to you.
Thank you. We've got another one here again, probably for yourself, Josh, unless anybody else has personal experience of this. The question is, you mentioned that sometimes a decision needs to be appealed. That could put people off or make them give up. Is there someone who can help them with that? And I guess more broadly as well, if they're struggling with the process or the decisions that are being made.
So RNIB, their employment team, will support and give advice to individuals as well that need to appeal decisions.
Yeah, that's right, they will.
Yeah. Great. So support is out there. RNIB
from the employment team. Yeah, the employment team at RNIB. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. Got another question here. Does access to work affect benefits? And actually what we haven't covered is whether or not it's means tested, Josh.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not means tested.
And does it?
No, it's not means tested. Sorry, but it does. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier. So if you're claiming employment support allowance or incapacity benefit, you can't claim those whilst having access to work.
Thank you.
Well, Ian, it doesn't affect PIP. I've had
it's a good point.
PIP at all. Claiming for a support worker or access to work, different schemes.
Thank you, Mark. Another question is, my husband and I are directors of our own company, and I will be an employee. I'm registered blind. Can I benefit from access to work? There's
yes.
a fairly technical question there. The answer is yes, says Josh.
Because, like we said earlier, access to work is able to open not just for employers, but to employees, but also those that are self-employed. But you're part of a business, so yes, absolutely, you'd be entitled to it.
Good news. Thank you. Okay, so we've just about reached the end of the webinar. Before I hand back to Denise, is there anything anybody would from the panel would like to add that they haven't had a chance to share this evening that think it may be of benefit for others to be aware of?
I'll just say one more thing regarding support workers. When you're applying for one and you're speaking to your advisor, be very clear exactly what you want your support worker to be doing, because it is separated into components. There's meals, hourly rate, accommodation, public travel, and if you forget and you think you're actually going to get something paid for work and you haven't agreed, then you may be liable to actually pay for that yourself or have to reimburse your own support, your own money. Just be very, very clear exactly what support you need right at the very beginning, because you might have to put another claim in to get it revised. Delay your grant.
Thank you, Mark. So a huge thanks to Bhavini, Mark, Simon, Josh and Emily for joining us this evening. Your willingness to share your personal experiences, I know, will have a huge impact on all those who have chosen to join us this evening. I do hope everybody's found it useful. You've got some nuggets to take away there, some information to enable you to make the right choices for yourself. And no doubt you're now aware of where you can turn to get some more information. So a huge thank you to all of you for joining us this evening. I'd just like to hand back to Denise, who is going to close the meeting.
Thank you very much, Paula, and thanks. My thanks as well to all of you that have joined in the panel this evening, sharing your insights, your expertise. It's been fabulous, and I've learned a lot. And all I'd say is, any employer would be absolutely privileged to have members of our community working for them. I think the one thing that all of you show is, I think Paula used a word before, resilience, but problem-solving skills. My goodness, you guys have got that down pat. So an absolute credit to any organisation. So keep going. We will be, after today, sending out a follow-up email, which will come out next week. It will have a link in to the recording that we've been doing. So if you want to listen again, or anybody that you think may benefit from the insights shared tonight, please do share it with them. We're going to be also seeking your feedback on today's session, and we really value that. So please do take a few minutes to complete that and let us know what you think. And if there's any other subjects that you'd like us to cover, we'd be really interested to know. I mentioned earlier that this is just one in a series of webinars that Retina UK has delivered. You can catch up on previous ones, including our one just 2 weeks ago, Ask the Expert session. And that's by visiting our website and just entering webinars in the search box. You can also catch them on our YouTube channel and Spotify. Our next webinar is going to take place on the 7th of December, and the team are going to be joined, this sounds really interesting, by Nicholas Ponticus. He's actually a bioinformation who uses computer power to tackle medical research challenges. So it's not the AI that we're thinking of that helps you to write a document. This is actually about medical research and using AI to develop and identify genetic causes of inherited retinal conditions from scans without the need for a genetic test. It sounds absolutely fascinating. So please be sure to register for that one and join us on the 7th of December. Please remember that Retina UK are a registered charity and we don't receive any government funding. We rely on our wonderful supporters to raise funds needed to provide services such as our helplines and information webinars such as tonight, and also to invest in groundbreaking medical research. There's lots of ways that you can support the work of the charity in big and small ways. So if you're interested in pushing yourselves to the limits or even out of a plane, we can do that. We can do something a little bit more sedate, like holding bake sales at home, or perhaps just asking local businesses in your area to put one of our collection boxes out. There are hundreds of ways you can support us, and we'd really be grateful. Just visit our website, retinauk.org.uk. And for looking at fundraising opportunities, it's just /fundraising. I'd like to thank you all again for joining us this evening. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.